Hello, everyone. Welcome. I really enjoyed in several of the sessions the past few days. One of the other moderators, Tony McKay from Down Under, said, "Good morning, colleagues," and he greeted everyone as colleagues, and I want to do that as well. We're here together to do some exploring of the future, and in many ways the past few days has been entirely about the future, but my role and my job is to help us get explicit about what should that future look like. And we had a great help from John Snow earlier with his panel in looking a little bit at the future. My name is John Mahaffey, and I'm a futurist, so I don't belong here. I'm not one of you. I'm not an educator in the sense that most of you are. But I've been asked to play a role, which is to help this discussion this morning in this session take a clear-headed look at the future and the possibilities there. I don't get the floor much, so I'm going to let my panelists bring us their wisdom in a moment, but let me take one more moment to do what I think is a useful framing of our discussion here. And this is really a premise that I'm going to assert, and which I'm happy to hear is a mistake as we have our discussion. And let me start with a passage from Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, which is a terrific book, of course. Alice talking to the Cheshire Cat. "Would you tell me, please, which way I ought to go from here?" The cat says, "That depends a good deal on where you want to get to." "I don't much care where," said Alice. "Then it doesn't matter which way you go," said the cat. "So long as I get somewhere," Alice added as an explanation. "Oh, you're sure to do that," said the cat, "if only you walk long enough." So I think, and by the way, you hear a lot of people take something from that quote and simplify it to, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. I think in the world of education today, we have much more diagnosis than we have design. This session is entitled and is about design. It's entitled Designing Education Futures. It's time to put all the great insights of this conference together and all your wisdom together and say, what truly are we aiming for? What kinds of education, what systems, what forms are we trying to achieve, are we headed for? So we're going to talk about that today, and I'm going to press my panel on that as far as I can take them. One other thing that I like to say about fostering change in almost any context is it's often easy to make the simple changes, to add a little something, what we usually call the low-hanging fruit, the things that are easy to do. Well, usually we've already done the things that are easy to do, or we can readily enough get those done. So the goal then is to say, what are the bigger changes? What are the big systems that need changing? And how might we change them? And what would we change them into? So I think that's the critical thing that we need to assign ourselves to do here this morning, straight away. I'd like to have each of you introduce yourselves. And Georges, you're up first, so tell us about yourself.
I'm Georges Haddad. I am a mathematician and professor at the Sorbonne University. And for the moment, I am the director of a new structure at UNESCO called Education, Research and Foresight. And the aim of this new structure is to readdress education trends and challenges for the next 20 to 30 years and to draw maybe into a future for education through mobilizing the best experts, the best institutions in the world, in developing and developed countries to address the real challenges of education at all levels, from early childhood to higher education, including what is fundamental today is lifelong learning opportunities. Thank you.
Great. Aisha.
I'm Aisha Bad Diallo. I'm a lifelong learner. I think I'll stop there. But my aim is really to make sure that whatever we do in life, it will be under gender perspective.
Okay.
My name is Peter Thiele. I'm Deputy Director for Vocational Training in the Federal Ministry of Education and Research in Germany, dealing with VET reforms. Everybody of you might know the dual system, which has to be reformed permanently to be up to date. It's VET research, it's innovation programs in vocational training, and policy advice. In former years, I've been head of division for international cooperation in the European area, but also in the international area, and also closely related to UNESCO, since we have the Univox Center of UNESCO in Germany.
Now, let me ask you maybe each to reflect on this. We're pretty sure, and I think we've heard over the last few days, that education systems need to change. There's a lot of different ideas about that. We have to have some sense of why we believe change is needed in order to align ourselves with saying what those changes should be. So maybe Georges, you can start with really any toehold you have on thoughts about what we're trying to do, what we're trying to achieve.
You know, as a mathematician, I always try to go back to the fundamentals.
Okay.
And for me, the three fundamental questions concerning education in learning are why, what, and how. Why do we learn? Why do we teach? What do we learn and what do we teach? And how do we learn and how do we teach? And this is, for me, the fundamental questions concerning the education challenges and the learning challenges. And we have permanently to readdress these three questions with a fourth question: how do we evaluate the acquisition of knowledge? And this is a fundamental challenge at all levels of education. How do we evaluate the acquisition of knowledge, and for skills, competencies, and also for what is very important in education is not only about professional skills, which is important, but also concerning values. Values education should transmit and should develop. And this is, for me, the right way to, if I may, to address education for the future, as it was for the past and as it is for the present.
Well, would you say, just one more moment, Aisha, would you say, Georges, that there's one of those elements or another that is weakest or most in need of reconsideration or change or strengthening?
Yes, I think if I may, I should also, in this perspective, address education in the three time perspectives, time dimension, following what a French philosopher and historian used to say. All activities, human activities, have to be addressed in the three time perspectives: the short time, the medium term, and the long term. I think now we are reducing more and more our activities and our development in education in the short term perspective, dealing with innovation, immediate respect. I think the medium term is a real challenge too, to be addressed, and the long term, which is much more difficult, dealing with the mentalities, the mental structures of human beings, to address the real challenges for education, which is, for me, the real challenge for the next 20, 30 years, as it has been for education for the long time.
Aisha, please.
As far as I'm concerned, the big question is, are children learning? Are they really learning? How are they learning? Why the progress is so slow, so low? What have the teachers done? Have they been well trained? Have they been motivated? That's one. Second, the fundamental for any agenda, is it really based on human rights, the right to education? The principles which are, how would I say that, drawing our work, is it based on equity? Is it based on inclusion? These are the fundamental questions. I'm also asking myself, since Jomchen, we have been talking about the goal of meeting the learning needs of all. Have we done it? If not, what shall we do to make sure that it will be the foundations of lifelong learning, meeting the needs of all?
Go ahead, Peter.
I'm not so pessimistic regarding the development of education and its future. If I just take the last 10 years and see what happened, we have a common understanding on the right for basic education, for the right of preschool education. I think this is common sense. But for me, and that was a bit missing in this discussion for the last 2 days, we didn't think further. What happens after that? What is the next step? What is our strategy? Where do we bring the people? And for sure, there are still a lot of problems. There are still millions of kids that don't receive basic education for the moment, but there are also hundreds of millions in the education system in our world that achieve the next steps of the qualification. And for me, the question is, what is the right mix? What mix will we need in the future? For example, in comparison of technical and vocational education and higher education. When I see the development in many countries, also developing countries, the target is to get kids to basic education, and the next target is to achieve a maximum rate of academic qualifications. I think this is the wrong way. From our experience, at least, I think that if you want to be a successful economy, and that is another point where I'm different to other participants in this conference, I think education is for the labor market. It is for economic success of the citizen. Not the basic education, but the vocational training, the academic qualifications are for the labor market achievements. And if you look to the mix of qualification that you have in a society, in an economy, then I think one can prove by available data, and that was confirmed by OECD, by ILO, that you have to have good balance between vocational training qualification and higher education qualification. For example, Switzerland lets only 25% of young people to go to higher education. They have the best performance in economy. They have the highest salary in vocational training. If you look to Europe, which is supposed to have one education policy, you have some countries like Germany with a youth unemployment of 6%, other countries with 55%, like Spain and Greece, for example. And if you look to their systems, to their education systems, they are very different. The one is purely school-based, the other has a good match with the cooperation of the world of work and the involvement and responsibility also of enterprises. And the other thing I wanted to mention, if we talk about the future of education, we have to see that the world is not having everywhere the same problems. Africa has other problems than Europe, for example. In Europe, we don't have the chance, I have to say, like Africa, to have a lot of young people that we can train for the future. We have the problem that we get less and less, and that we get older and older. We have an increase from 80 million to 140 million people beyond 65 in the next couple of years in Europe, and we lack labor force, we lack young people, so our focus regarding education policy is more on how do we get elder workers to continuing training, how do we make them fit for future developments. So I just want to say that if we talk about the future of education, we have to distinguish on the one hand on the systemic level, on the institutional level, and on the individual level, but we also have to face that the different world regions are in different state of the art regarding their demography or regarding their education. And if I may say that finally, I think there are 4 to 5 points that are of utmost importance for the future development of education, I think, throughout the world. The one is, and that is true for developing as well as industrialized countries, we need another attitude regarding education policy. And I think that's also what you wrote and said. We need a holistic view. That means education is not one pillar and other areas are other pillars, like labor or social policy. We have to see it as a holistic activity. We have to involve other partners. In Germany, for example, the government is not alone. It's not possible for the government alone to cope with the education problem that we have. We have to involve enterprises. We have to involve foundations. One example is the example of education chains. We have more than 50,000 young people in Germany that that drop out of school, for example, and 100,000 that don't match the quality requirements of vocational training. We started a preventive strategy saying you have to start in class 7 already, accompany the pupils, do a kind of testing of them, give them vocational guidance, and then give them tutors, buddies, that accompany them over years in order to replace bad parenthoods and also bad social environment, for example, to get the success. And that means we have to involve different stakeholders in this education process and make them responsible, up to financing.
Let me let the others respond on that and anything. You're inventing the whole program all at once there, so hold on a second. Aisha has something to say.
Anyway, he has said it all. I thought that we were going to speak, two.
We will,
anyway,
we will.
Since no, it's all right. For Africa, now you have brought me back to Africa. We think that you have to respond to the learning needs of all and the needs of the economy and the society. Therefore, our youth today, they are more than 40% of the population. They need the fundamental skills. They need the transferable skills we are talking about. They also need the technical skills. Because our youth today are asking for democracy. They would like to have a voice in the decision-making of their countries. So we have to respond to it. It's either we take care of it, plan with them, whatever activities and programs they need, we have to plan with them, otherwise they will not accept it. Okay. And higher education, they have to reprogram, to revisit their programs in order to see the kind of filière, the kind of, the kind of jobs that are needed so that they will reorient their programs, involve the youth, so that at the end of the training, they will have jobs. So it's almost the same thing. So we have to restructure completely the education sector. And education has to understand that it's intersectorial. You cannot deal with anybody without partnership. The government has its role to play. Donors that have committed themselves will have to respect the commitment made. The civil societies, because I belong to the civil society, will have to be involved in setting the agenda, but also in implementing the agenda. The private sector has its own role.
So, George, are you going to agree, disagree, expand?
I would like to go back to these fundamentals, and I agree fully with Aisha. I think the challenge of education for the future, as it is, I think we should not try to be too futuristic, forgetting that the past and the heritage of the past is very important. We are not, how do we say, amnesic structure or mental structure. We have a past, we have an history, we have tradition, and if we want to address the future of education, we have also to know where we come from, where societies come from, etc. So the challenge of equity, quality, creativity, and responsiveness are the four challenges for education, and we should always remember that UNESCO has produced 2 world reports on education. The first one in '72, called Learning to Be, under the chairmanship of Mr. Edgar Faure, and the second one by Jacques Delors in '96, called A Treasure Within, Education, A Treasure Within. So I would like to recall the 4 pillars for education. The 4 pillars, which are fundamental if we want to readdress education in a permanent way, are the 4 pillars for education are learning to be. What does it mean today? And what will it mean in the future? Learning to do. What does it mean today? And what will it mean in the future? Learning to learn or learning to know. What does it mean today? And what will it mean in the future? And fundamentally also, learning to live together. What does it mean today? And what will it mean in the future for education challenges? So I stop with that, and then I will come back on the 7 tensions and right balance.
Well, now, George, there can't be too many lists. We can't keep track of all that. Yeah. No, the fundamentals are fundamental. They're absolutely clear. And by the way, one of the learners said the other day that he would add to the 4 the learning to create. And this is very much a young people's sensibility that I see all over the place, is create together, often called co-create, and I think that's very powerful. I want to get you folks. Let me again play my role, my contrarian role here. George, you said that we shouldn't be too futuristic. One of the presenters or panelists the other day said, "Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater," which is a nice expression. I don't disagree with those things, because there isn't any magic to simply changing because you feel like changing, because you think that change is automatically good. But I wonder, I want to take us out 15 or 20 years. And I'm prepared to hear that things will be much the same. But will we still have children sitting in rows in front of an adult? Will we still be using books? Will we still have them sitting there 6 to 8 hours a day? Will university students go and live at a university and take their coursework there? Will we have examinations, and will they look like the ones that we have now? Will students each have a pencil and paper or a handheld device, a personal computer? Is education a lot about supervision? And in the US, we call it daycare. It's really just a place to safely store children. These are things that seem to have been true and durable for a long time. Surely these things are not going to all be the same in 20 years. So yes, we want to not get rid of the good and the strong, and we're not going to step away from the fundamentals that should have been true 10, 20, 100, 200 years ago. But surely the system in the year 2032, 20 years from now, we need Mr. Wolfram to help me with that. Surely the system won't look the same. So how will it look different? What should it look like? We can speculate here. We're not setting policy today. So we can speculate. What would we build now? What would we plan to build if we didn't have the constraints that we have now? What should it look like? So go ahead, George. You take a shot.
It's a very difficult question and difficult to answer. I think now, due to the modern technologies, to the development, etc., and to the new social contract of education. And we have to rethink education in terms of its social contract towards individuals and societies. Education will go beyond institutions and schools, as it is. You learn and you educate outside schools, universities, high school, etc. And this will increase in power. Knowledge will be and is already accessible everywhere through internet, through all these medias, etc. So the challenge now is this availability of knowledge, which is increasing in power due to research. We should not forget that education is not only transmitting knowledge, but improving knowledge through research and innovation. So knowledge will be available everywhere and at every moment of our life. How will we access this knowledge the right way to get and to create a new challenge for humanity, and for having building a new humanism based on knowledge acquisition, but the right knowledge with critical capacities, critical values, creativity, as you mentioned, but also equity, as Aishaba said, for women, for girls, but also for marginalized people and communities. This is the challenge. So knowledge will increase, the access of knowledge will improve, but the question of how do we access the right knowledge and how do we evaluate the knowledge acquisition? This is the challenge.
So Aisha, what do you think?
You see, the world has become a village.
Okay.
We have to learn how do I say that, share knowledge. But we are not all at the same starting point.
Yes.
So my question to you is, how are you going to harness the indigenous knowledge we have in developing countries?
Do you have an idea how to do that?
It will be to equip these défavorisés, the marginalized group. Okay. How are we all going to contribute to equipping them with the tools for them to share the indigenous knowledge they have?
Do you believe technology has a role in that?
In a way, yes, if there is quality control. This morning they were saying you can learn from these new devices.
Yes.
But how can you control the quality, not destroying the knowledge they have? Because most of the time, if they think that you will not give the right message they are giving you, they will shut their mouths. How to make sure that they will have confidence in you so that they will accept to share their knowledge. Okay. 1. 2, we don't have light in the villages where our people who, for instance, in health, they have a lot of knowledge in health. We don't have light. what are we going to do? Are we going to use solar energy to reach them? So there is a lot of challenge.
Now, I think that's very clear. If we look 20 years out to the year 2032, do you believe that light or basic supply of electricity or access is still missing in the typical setting that you're talking about?
I will tell you now that if we behave, I am an African, so I'm talking as an African, a responsible African. If we behave and we manage right our wealth, then we will be able to equip, we will have light in 20 years' time.
Okay.
Meaning that our people will have to be empowered to ask account to their governments to say the resources that we are generating have to be used to develop our countries so that we will have light and we will have access to the global knowledge and share our indigenous knowledge.
So let's assume the leaders now and forward have your values.
That's where the civil society organizations are important.
Yes, and let's assume it works. Let's assume that the right people are in place and do the right things. Then do we have the outcome that we're looking for? What does a village school look like in 2032? A typical village school that today in 2012 has no electricity. What does it look like? What should it look like?
The kids will not be in a classroom.
Okay.
They will be learning in a classroom, outside the classroom. But you know that in Africa, I hope that we will not lose that culture. We will always have our wise people from whom we learn.
Yes.
So that is important also. We have to bear that in mind.
Okay.
And it's a big challenge.
Yeah.
But I have confidence that it will happen.
Good. So do I. So do I. Peter, now you can readily now play out the thought you had earlier that it isn't the same in each place in the world, obviously. So, but I'd like you to speculate on the year 2032 and what happens in the classroom. Choose a level of education or a purpose of education. What do you think will be going on?
I hope I don't disappoint you. For the first, I agree with my two colleagues regarding the challenges and the next steps to be taken. Regarding the question, which tools do we use in education? Okay. And for me, for example, IT is a tool. It's not the revolution as such. I also think we will have open learning spaces. We will have more self-monitored learning by students. The teachers change to mediators rather than being the traditional teachers. All that was discussed during this meeting here. But I think what we need is a change on a very different level. And I come back to the point that we need a kind of holistic approach of education policy that involves different actors. It's not only the people in the government and the NGOs that do the education. We have to have a shift of responsibilities in that field. We have to make other bodies responsible, like the industry. It took in Germany maybe 50, 60 years to get the dual system, to take one example, started. But it is not a charity thing of German enterprises to do it. They understood in the midterm that it was a win-win situation for them when they invest in vocational training because they get the better benefit on the labor market. I think this kind of things will happen more and more worldwide since ILO and OECD and other regions are promoting that kind of better mix of education and world of work. That is one example.
What's a 2032 German classroom? I have a 14-year-old son. You have a 14-year-old daughter, right?
Yeah.
If they were 14 in 2032, they go to school. Do they go to school? What is it that they're doing? What does it look like, and what is happening there?
If they go to school, they will have that what was discussed already, that we will have an open space, that we will use IT, that we will have more a focus on critical thinking, on analyzing information and other things that were already discussed during this meeting. And I think Mr. Schleicher yesterday in OECD mentioned all that already. Okay. So I don't want to go too much into it. But what is needed from my point of view, and that is what I'm still missing a bit in this conference, is that those who are responsible for the education system, which are not here many, have to change the system level. We talk about the school, we talk about the teacher, we talk about the pupil, but this is the end of the process from my point of view.
Okay,
you have to change the system, and that is what I mean with a holistic approach and the realization of the lifelong learning approach. At the moment, for example, you are stuck in many countries when you start basic education and you go to the next step. For example, TVET, you are stuck after that. There's no chance to go to higher education. There's a kind of autism between the pillars of the education system. To open that, to not only for access but also for recognition of prior learning is one of the big issues that we're discussing in Europe. And it's not the first time that we discuss about the future of Europe here. There's an agenda in Europe, EU 2020, which is exactly dealing with that issue. Where should we be in the year 2020 in the field of education? And this is more dealing with the system reform. I could give you a lot of examples. It's depending on the time what we are planning there, rather than the focus on the school and the teacher, what the
Yes,
pupils do.
I see the school as two things, as an endpoint to the system that we all care so much about, first, and then second, if there are not visible changes in the school itself, then it may be hard to see that there have been changes anywhere in the system. But I can ask you, just for provocation's sake, what's happening at the Ministry of Education in 2032? Where surely policies are different, the influences are different, the stakeholders represented may be different. Are you sitting next to someone permanently in a station near you who's from Siemens or somewhere like that? Who's driving? Use Germany as an example. Who will be driving curriculum and education in 2032?
I think it is similar to the teacher development. We come away from the teacher to the moderator of processes, to the organizer of networked education policy, taking into account a lot of stakeholders. For example, in Germany, what might be astonishing for many, since we are a growing population, we have more and more pensionists, seniors, that care for the kids. We have, as I mentioned, this project, Education Chains, where we have kids in class 7 who fail. To find them out, we do a kind of profiling of them, not meaning learning outcomes, but meaning what are their hidden potentials, where can we get them? And on that basis, we do vocational orientation, not in the school, outside the school with all the kids. And those who still fail, they get an accompanied by a body. The body is not in the school, he's outside. He's paid privately and publicly, and we have the pensionists who care for the kids, but not just like that for a project. They care for that for 6 years. That's a preventive policy in order to help the kids to finish their school and to get access to a good, at least vocational training, if not higher education in the end. That's a societal project, and that is the example for where education policy has to go from my point of view.
So, Aisha, what do you think is a nice way to tie in others into the system?
Yeah, let me come back to what I think you mentioned assessment or whatever.
Yes.
To me, exams are failing children.
Failing children, okay.
We should not have exams. I mean, in my country, we have exams. In Africa, we have exams. When you evaluation, yes. I think that what you should evaluate is the learning, how is the child learning? What is he interested in?
Yes.
And then develop that. Because each child has a potential. So how to tap into that potential and develop it? I think this is going to be the big challenge for all of us in the coming years.
Okay, George, what do you think?
It's difficult to express exactly. I think that we should not reduce education to the individual level. Education has a fundamental role to play at a collective level, to create what we call collective intelligence. Okay. It's now reducing more and more to the diploma marathon, to get the diploma, etc. What does it mean today? We live longer. We are productive longer thanks to progress in medical health, etc., etc. So I repeat again, the challenge for education for the future is to address the possibility to educate and to learn in a lifelong perspective.
Yes.
What kind of structures, what kind of policies could offer the best means and the best way for each individual and each collectivity to address this lifelong learning perspective? And I think that one of the main, when I listen to all what I have listened to today about this competitiveness, skills development, diploma acquisition, etc., this is creating what I call the education stress today.
Stress, okay.
Education is a stress. In families, among children,
Yes,
look what happened. Among children, they commit suicide because they feel that they are not at the level expected by the collectivity, by the families.
Yes.
I think education is a place where you build confidence, where you develop creativity, and we have to rethink the way we learn and we educate. And as Aisha said about these diplomas, etc., we should rethink even the rhythms of education.
Yes.
We live longer. What does it mean today to have a bachelor degree at 20, to have a master degree at 22, and a PhD at 25, when you have nothing to do after that? When you are unemployed,
So,
when you have no capacity to learn and to continuously learn and to reevaluate your competencies, and when you feel even rejected by society.
so your future system, it seems from what you're saying, would assess at the societal level, not the individual level.
Yes, I
How
think,
are we doing as a society, in other words?
I think education is a social concern. It cannot be the concern of a happy few or a small number of responsible. I think the education of the future should come from a social consensus.
Okay,
Can I
Aisha,
add
go.
something? I think the system should be open. You come in when you are able to do it, you go out, do something else, come back whenever you need. It has to be open. You learn when you have time, you learn when you need it. The education system has to accept you. If you come from, let's say, technical and vocational, and you want to go to the formal and higher whatever, you have to be allowed to. So it has to be open. You go in, you go out, you come in and you come out. It has to be really flexible.
Now, I want
Learn at any time.
I want to see what Peter has to say about that, but I'm starting to wonder how we get there, and we'll be talking about that with the help of our audience. Go ahead, Peter.
I just want to add, I'm completely with you regarding this analysis. When I talked about testing, it was not testing, it was exactly the analysis of potentials, of hidden potentials. So we try to build up on the strength of the young people and not to find their weaknesses in order to make them stronger. That is the idea. That is the idea. Despite of that, I think one very important development in education, which was not discussed during this conference at all, what I found very interesting, will be a revolution in the education of the future. That is the shift to learning outcomes. We are not more going, I think it's not only in Europe, it's in all world regions, not more going on the input. How many teachers do I have? How many curricula do I have? What counts is the learning outcome of the individual. Never mind where you learned and how long you learned. Your example that someone of TVET has at the moment the problem to access higher education can be easily overcome if you go for learning outcomes. If the learning outcome is appropriate in TVET, you have access to higher education. One example from Europe, we do the training of nurses in non-academic training. UK does it in academic. If you compare the learning outcome, it might be the same. So it doesn't matter whether it's an academic qualification or a non-academic qualification, because the learning outcome is the thing that counts. And for us to show that it comes real also in an education system, this little revolution, we have for the first time for 50 years in Germany now the equality in the qualification frameworks we have of a non-academic Meister with an academic bachelor. They are on the same level. So we overcome these barriers between the different pillars of education. And that's, I think, what you mean also with lifelong learning, and you mean with lifelong learning, everyone who once reached one level has to have automatically the access to the next level. That is the idea behind it. And that's where we have to go.
Now, vocational training, in my view, is iterative now. It's not learn a trade and apply it for life. It's changeable and changeable and changeable again. So when you talk about TVET, are you talking about getting someone trained in a profession and then they're done? And are we talking then about a teenager or a young adult? Or are we talking about whenever that needs to happen in life? Because I think that right now we're looking at a split between the academic and the vocational for people in their teenage and coming into adulthood. But then what? What have they got if the industry goes away?
That's a question that is combined with the quality of training. If your training is broad enough, you will cope with many other jobs. One example, we have 350 occupations in the dual system. Only 50% of the young people who did the training for one occupation are still in that occupation 2 years after. They went to other educations, to other branches, because the education was broad enough. As concerns the relation of vocational education and training and higher education, we have now also, I would say, revolutionary trends in Europe. For example, Germany, where I come from, that's why I mentioned it. We have the decision that everyone who did vocational training has automatically access to higher education. And even more, if they do continuing training courses as a Meister, they get recognized parts of their qualification for the coming academic courses. Okay. So that's what I mean with interlinking the pillars, bridging the gaps between the autistic pillars of the education system. Okay. And that's something you will not solve by project that you promote. This, you have to go to the system, you have to go to the people that deal with the system in order to change that.
George, you filled your notebook yet?
Sorry?
Have you filled your notebook yet? What do you have to say? What do you think? Microphone, please.
Microphone, yes. I've been asked to be simple, so I try to be simple. And I would like to give 7 lines which are essential for education for the future, to have an education landscape. The first line, and what we call with my friend Reza, I don't know if he's here, the photographer and the artist, is the right balance between the local and the global. I think education has to address a right balance between the local and the global at all levels. The right balance between the collective and the individual. This is what I mean. We have to develop collective intelligence and not individualistic intelligence. The right balance between tradition and modernity. This is what I say. Education also has to deal with tradition, history. The right balance between long-term and short-term. And this is dealing with also lifelong education perspective. The right balance between competitivity and equality of opportunity, I finish soon. The right balance between the extraordinary expansion of knowledge and our capacities to assimilate this knowledge. And this is also something we have to deal with, and our cognitive capacities, and we should not educate just to add, and to have a disastrous result. And just to finish, the right balance between the spiritual and the material. So this is, for me, the future of education.
Well, is it though? Because I agree, probably no one here would disagree with those 7 things, right? Of course, the right balance. How does that come out? Do you have a vision? It doesn't have to be official. Do you have a vision of the future system? How does this come together? What are we doing? What are learners doing?
I repeat again, the future system has to be a kind of subtle composition of traditional means, schools, universities, because children, students need to meet, to live together, and not to live in virtuality.
Yes.
They need to live together, learning to live together, so they have to meet each other and to travel. Students of tomorrow will travel. I think we have to develop also strong institutional networks of education.
Okay.
An institution isolated has no future today. Even the best universities today, in 20 years, if they still remain isolated with their prestige, will not survive. So the networking challenge of universities to create mobility of students, mobility of teachers, mobility of knowledge, sharing of knowledge. And I think that even at schools, you know, it's very important that even a school, a primary school, feels that they are not isolated in the local dimension.
Yes.
They have to build network, and this is what UNESCO has done through networks as associate school or a UniTwin program for universities, etc. And also, as I repeat, to value and to have the capacity to evaluate and to put value on acquisition of knowledge outside the education system. And this is a real challenge for education tomorrow, how to recognize competencies, skills, not only at professional level, but also at humanitarian level.
Okay, let's, and Aisha, you and then Peter, I want to get your thoughts along these lines, and then we're going to let our audience, who we are here to serve, have their turn. So
I will be very quick.
Good.
It will be meeting learning needs of all.
Of all.
At any time. And whatever we will be talking about, we have to be bold but realistic and practical.
Yes. That's great, because many of us fell into the trap here at this conference of referring to the young learners that are here and saying, you're the learners, we're not. Shame on us, right? Peter, go ahead.
I'll be brief now. I see the system as a kind of rainbow. Once you started in the rainbow, you have the possibility to go to any other color within the rainbow or step of the rainbow. And never mind what you learned and where you learned, you have the possibility to get this validated and use it for the next steps of your career. That is this very simple message, which is on the system level, again, very complicated to install.
Sure, yeah, okay. You got one lined up, number one. Please, then.
Thank you very much. I'm Oscar Becerra. I come from Peru. And I think our panelists are great thought leaders. And I would like to hear from them some more concrete ideas, because we are listening to great wishes. And I think we can all have those wishes. But how to make that happen? For example, a concrete model of what universities are giving away their courses, but they are not giving away credit. Because when it comes to build a model, everybody wants to give away someone else's things. The ICT industry fights those who can offer computers that are at cost. Universities fight those that give credit for what they give for free. So we would like to listen not only the good wishes, but also the concrete model. How will it look like you have been asking them?
Yes, okay, and I appreciate that. I want to compile a couple more. Number three, let's have that one.
Hi, my name is Haya Athani. I'm a student at Georgetown University. I'm also a WISE learner. And my question to you is that we heard all of the challenges that are facing education right now. We heard you say that there's a need to tap into the student potential, to inject values into education. And my question is, who's supposed to do all that? Is this top-down approach still going to work? And in the future, who's going to be designing education? Who do you think should be responsible for that? Thank you.
Let's work on those. If each of you has a thought on that, that's great. Aisha, what do you think?
I did not understand what the gentleman from this side said. I had not put my earphones.
Okay, let me just, I think it's a part of it is a clear call for concreteness. What are we actually talking about creating for the future?
It is education for all throughout life.
That, and what the questioner
And we have
said
to be practical.
Right, what the questioner said is that he appreciates and agrees with the wisdom up here, but he wants to know, what does that mean that we should now begin to do? What are we creating institutionally, physically, you know, the infrastructure, the institutional and policy changes. So he's looking for not principles, we've got those, you each share those. He wants to know, what are we going to do?
It depends on what is at control level. Whatever is being said up there has to be translated and tailored to the conditions of the country. So I will go back to him and say, what is possible in your country to build on what we have all been talking about since 3 days. Now, coming back to you, I will say that whatever is going to be designed, it has to be done by all and with the participation of the young people that we are talking about. I mean, all of us, we have to be involved. But the participation of the young people is really paramount.
Okay, that's great. And I heard a great story from another presenter here about school designed by the children, not only by the children, but a lot of the physical design was directly from the children. They drew pictures, they had their input. So, George.
No, again, of course, I have to say I don't like this top-down and down-top. It's a social concern. It's a collective concern about education. And the education of the future should be education for all and for all responsibilities. It's not only education for ministers or for these top people who were down when they began their life, you know. It's just to show that education becomes a social concern. But as a model, I would like to be precise. We have a small example which has some values, which is not perfect, and concerning higher education in Europe. I was part of it when I was the president of the Sorbonne at this time. We decided among rectors, among teachers, among students, among ministers, to see what kind of higher education we could build in Europe not only to have quality higher education, but to make higher education a vector for peace, for understanding, for solidarity. And we tried and we worked hard, it took years and years, to build what we call the European space for higher education and research, which is not accomplished for the moment, but which has developed a system which is not at national level, but which creates mobility of teachers, mobility of learners, mobility of researchers, recognition of qualification, and we are still working on that. And this could be taken maybe as a modest but concrete model of what education should build, not only at a local level, but at a global level, to make education a vector towards modernity and towards individual and collective accomplishment.
All right, Peter, your thoughts, it's what are we concretely talking about and who's going to do it? That's a nice, succinct framing, I think, of the two.
Yeah, I think education has also to do with financing, if you talk about concrete things. And for a start, I think it is important that we get a kind of global commitment that education and research are the asset for any development. And that's why, for example, I come back to Europe and the European cooperation. There's a benchmarking process running, which I find very good and very valuable, that 3% of GDP are invested in education and research, for example. In Germany, this led to the fact that from one day to the other, we had 12 billion more to invest in education and in research. That was a fantastic development, and I think financing is one asset to make things operative and concrete, and that was the question of the colleague, I think, on the one hand.
Okay, yeah.
But I don't want to only talk about financing, I want to give 2 or 3 examples. What does it mean to fulfill all these wishes? For example, that every kid has the right to go to preschool and has the right to get an access and have good trainers there. That has to be developed by the governments. You can have as many projects as you want, you will not get it on a systemic level, the governments don't provide it, so there has to be pressure on governments to provide it. The same is true for full-day schools. You have to provide the full-day schools in order to give them the best capabilities and the best possibilities to develop. And another example that I have, and these two are really working in Germany in the meantime, took decades to get there. The third one is, for example, the opening of universities. The universities were seen and saw themselves as a kind of elitary closed shop in former times, and now they open up, also by public investment and public pressure, for non-academics in order to provide courses for them, to be really open universities. That are concrete examples how you can develop this kind of lifelong learning approach, or rainbow approach, that we were talking about.
Okay.
And the second question that you raised was on who is responsible. I said at the beginning, we have to have a holistic education policy. The ministries and the bureaucrats are the moderators and the financiers. They are also, from my point of view, the intellectual input givers, along others, but we have to involve more and more stakeholders from industry, from research, up to pensionists.
Okay, that's great. Now, I want to try that again. We'll take these 1, 3, and 4 in that order and compile our thoughts around those. Go ahead, number 1.
Well, thank you for the interventions. And what I like about the discussion is, although some people have found it to be highly philosophical, it's the fact that there is a sense of agency. It's we make our future. So it's not a future that's going to happen to us. It's people who are thinking through their future. Now, what I would like to say is I'd like to see education become once again a public good, and I think I like very much, Georges Haddad, your link to history, because we are living a spiral form of history. It's not a linear form of history. The future is not a line, it's a spiral form. So there were times when it was a public good. Our present now is actually experiencing education becoming totally privatized, and it's more and more becoming privatized. And that brings me to the issue of who designs our policies, who are the ones who are driving our agendas. Definitely, we are moving towards corporate design, globalized design, and it's time we actually reshape that to a large extent. And the way to do that is, again, we have to devise proper mechanisms for consensus building in each nation, which is not through ministries of education, but through national councils that bring together everyone to shape out what the old philosophers thought education was all about is for a better society. It's for a better human being, it's for a better society. It's education to get over all the inequities, the injustice, conflict, all the issues we're facing today, poverty, etc. So it's an education that will make us become a better human being and a better society.
Great, thank you. Number 3 there.
Thank you. I am Dr. Amjad Ali from Pakistan. We are discussing about the designing and shaping of the future of education, but it is a surprise for me that teachers and students are totally absent from the scene. They are not discussed at this forum. I would like to ask from the panelists that what should be the role of teachers and students in designing and shaping of the future of education, keeping in view that our students are more smart and more advanced in the use of ICTs as compared to their teachers. Thank you.
Thanks. Number 4, you're there.
I'm Muhyiddin Tawq from Jordan. I think one element is missing now in the 4 pillars that UNESCO talked about so many years ago. And one of the WISE students has alluded to it yesterday, and that is the learning to create. Yes. This conference is about change and about innovation. And isn't it time for UNESCO now to really and seriously think that we need to add the learning to change, learning to adapt to change, since change is taking place very rapidly. Now, if this is so, UNESCO also needs to think about a 4th question beside the 3 basic questions George has raised, and that is, what do we assess? If we are going to teach for change, then we are going to assess for change, personal development, working together, life skills, collaboration, so on and so forth. And my response to the question you have raised, Mr. Chair, what is the kind of education we are going to have in 2032? It depends who you are talking about. If you are talking about the 10 privileged % in the world, it's going to be a totally different, maybe, school and education. But if you are talking about the 70% of the population of the world who still do not have clear water, they don't have sanitation facilities, they don't have proper roads, so on and so forth. Okay. If you ask a young child in the middle of, let's say, Asia, Pakistan, Bangladesh, or Africa, what kind of school do you like to have in the future? Maybe he will tell you, I would like to have a school with clear water, with drinkable water, with a school which has a bathroom, a school which I can play in, so on and so forth. So what are we talking about? And this brings us to the global responsibility of those who have towards those who do not have.
Let me have the panel respond. And George, you've been accused of something missing in the UNESCO philosophy, so please.
I don't feel accused.
I
feel comforted in what we try, and I will tell it. Concerning the public good, education, knowledge is a public good, of course, and we have to fight that for knowledge to be a real universal public good, accessible for all. The problem now, and this is the reality, and those who say the contrary are, I'm sorry to be aggressive, liars.
Liars, okay.
Education is becoming a market.
Yes.
It's becoming more and more a market. And when we speak of equity, equality of opportunity, we have to fight the market orientation of education.
Yes. Okay.
And this is something which represents the education of the future. Of course, we have to address that some could offer their children a better education because they have the capacity. But we have to fight, and this is UNESCO mission, to make education equal opportunity for all. You heard about what we call shadow education, the shadow education system, which is developing all over the world. I can tell you that in my building in Paris, confidence is being lost towards teachers and the education system and institution. And what do the parents in this very bourgeois building, fortunately for me, that every evening at 5, an army of private tutors invest the building. Okay. Who can offer that when 1 hour costs 200 or 300 euros? Sure. So we have to address this issue. Yes. And we have to make education not become a market. It has to be a public good, and if not a public service, when knowledge is a public universal good and service. Good. Concerning teachers and students, I feel myself a teacher and a student, and Aisha told it, she's a permanent learner, but of course, I think the voice of teachers and students is important. And just to finish with UNESCO, why did I mention the 4 pillars? Because we are revisiting the 4 pillars and trying to define the new pillars for education. And this is a challenge that has just started, and we need to mobilize the entire community concerned by education. And you will hear about that, but we need your concern, your support, and your vision about education. Of course, the 4 pillars 20 years ago are not the real pillars for tomorrow. So we have to revisit the 4 pillars, learning to do, learning to learn, learning to I don't remember. Learning to act and learning
create,
to live together.
All right, Aisha, what do you think about all this?
Let me just remind you that the first, I used to be UNESCO, so I have to add to it. You know, the first report was only 3 pillars. With Delors, we had 4, so we can add some more. Okay?
Plenty of room, okay.
Yeah, no matter. Well, education is it's really a public good. We have to keep that.
Yes.
And when we talk about consensus building at country level, it's all stakeholders. It is teachers, it is parents, children, and it is other sectors that do not have anything to do with, well, we think that, but they contribute to the education, like health, like communication, like finance. I mean, all stakeholders. In fact, in Jomchen, it was said that we have to have a commission for education for all, bringing in all stakeholders, so that the designing of the education will be well done. Indeed, youth are involved. I think that is. You see, the education should be inclusive, equitable, with a right approach, which is human rights, in particular, the right to education.
I'm going to suppose one thing here, and then I'll give Peter a turn. I think we've just agreed, probably, that, well, we have agreed that education should be a public good. And I think we're also agreeing by saying that our view of 2032 is that we will have recovered it as a public good, strengthened it as a public good, and strengthened it in all these other ways as well. So that vision includes wrestling control back where it has been taken from the market forces that have done some of the things wrong. Some of those outcomes are wrong. So I hope that's true. Peter, what do you think about all this?
I would support the idea that education is a public good for sure, but again, you have to differentiate. Basic education, the first qualifications, definitely public good, involvement of all stakeholders needed, no question. But as soon as it comes to continuing training, we have to be very clear in continuing education that you have more self-responsiveness, that there's responsiveness of the industry and of the government. So this is changing also in the lifetime of the education process. So it's not like it's not black or white. It's really, we have to differentiate the debate in order to come to concrete conclusions. Yes. And that leads me also to the second point, teachers and students. For sure, they can be involved, and they are involved in the development of education reforms with different fora. What we found out in Germany, that nevertheless, it was very difficult to get their real voice. One little example, young migrants, young people with migrant background. When people like us came there to discuss with them why they are not participating enough in different schooling and vocational training, it was limited outcome. What we did was empowerment of young people. Young migrants told young migrants why education is important. They had their fora to discuss that, and that runs all over Germany now, this kind of conferences of young migrants among the mothers, and they do resolutions, turn to us.
Nice. So
that's a really nice approach to really get actively involved with young people.
so the community is teaching itself. Students are teaching students. I like that very much.
And the last point that struck me very much when I was talking about differentiation of the education realities, that would not mean arrogance. I just wanted to address that there are different world regions with different state-of-the-art of education, different educational problems. The major thing that we have to do here at this conference, that's unique to have this conference, to bridge the different continents and to find a cooperation modi among us. And there is one solution to work on the bilateral level and to think on bilateral cooperation. But another one, which we discussed already at the UNESCO conference in Shanghai a couple of months ago, is to foster interregional cooperation. You mentioned European cooperation. We have an agenda in the field of academic education. We have an agenda in the field of vocational training. That's not just an agenda, but ministers come together to define targets, they define instruments, they give the budget, and they do the monitoring. And this kind of models could be mirrored towards other world regions, and one could see where there's not a possibility to learn from there as well. The example Europe shows 27 countries, 27 very different education systems, but via learning outcomes, we come really to measurement of our progresses in the education system. That could be a proposal for this meeting as well, to come to this more interregional cooperation, not just bilateral cooperation.
Now, we'll all, okay, go ahead. Briefly, because I want to get some more audience involvement. Go ahead.
When we in Africa, we organize the education, we invite you to come, and you do not invite us. So next time, please invite us.
Okay, good. Okay. Go ahead, George. One more. Remember, microphone.
Aishaiba is fully right, and this is what UNESCO has always tried to do, to share experiments, experiences, etc., but also to listen to Africa. It's not to impose to Africa a model which comes from Europe, but to help Africans to build their model. But I would like also to mention something which is important. When you say that we have to differentiate as a public good between basic, secondary, technical, vocational, let's go back to this lifelong learning challenge. When you have millions of qualified people which one day wake up and they are completely unemployed, were completely thrown out of the systems. What do you do? Is it not a humanitarian aspect of education? So it's, if it is private, they have no capacity to pay for that.
That's right.
So I think it's a real public concern because, of course, young children and young people need to have education, but all these adults we are completely left out of society represent a real challenge of solidarity and cooperation. So I think we have to address this.
Now, we have just a little bit more time. Thank you. And what I want to try to do is get more from you folks out there. So can we go 4, 3, 2, 1 and hear what you have to say? Please say it briefly. Say it briefly. And then we may be able to respond a little bit to that. But this is your venue as well. So go ahead. 4, 3, 2, 1, please.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the panel for their very profound analysis of the future of our children's education. And all what you said should be followed by teachers throughout the world in all the schools. But there is one thing that I would like to draw your attention to. There is designing education future. There is an education system that is still invisible and yet very powerful. In TV, at home, for children after school going back and looking at Hollywood violent movies and responding to another form of a word which is based on peace and development.
Okay.
Please, what is the opinion of, we are for the liberty of speech and of educational system, but I think we have to pay more attention to the projection of violence throughout our TV. Thank you.
And we may get a response here, but I want to hear all the questions. Please go ahead.
شكرا للسادة المسؤولين. Hello, I'm Lebanese. Thank you very much to all the panelists for having presented their vision for the future. And I'd also like to thank the moderator, who has very skillfully moderated this session. And I would also like to thank the Qatar Foundation for having organized this symposium. Just a couple of questions and maybe suggestions. The first question concerns partnerships. Now, if we want to plan or implement education policies involving all the different stakeholders, as well as learners and students, if we want everyone to participate, and if we want to design long-term policies, as Mr. George Haddad mentioned, without restricting our view to the short-term objectives, now, as partners, we have the possibility of trying to see what the future should look like in order to design programs that reconcile learning outcomes and the needs of the labor market, to try to meet both requirements. And concerning this dual system in Germany, does our German colleague can he give us some figures about the number of graduates coming onto the labor market benefiting from this dual system that he mentioned? And finally, are businesses, are companies happy about the productivity of these young graduates coming onto the labor market? Are they satisfied with their skills? Now, concerning education for all, now, if we look at different reports issued by UNESCO and the Jacques Delors report in particular, and if we take a look at the 7 principles that Mr. Haddad mentioned, can we say something about striking a balance between knowledge acquisition on the one hand and human values on the other hand, which are necessary to meet the objectives that are contained in the Human Rights Declaration? And I'd just like to make a suggestion. We have spoken about the need to bring about policy changes in the 21st century, particularly education policies. And we hope to provide education for all in both developed and developing countries. Now, in that case, shouldn't we ask countries, the countries who have funding capacity, to provide resources within the framework of partnerships and cooperations to developing countries? Thank you very much.
I would like to bring a concrete example, perhaps for reflection about how the 4 pillars could work and how the 7 items of proposal that were there. I deal strongly with indigenous people's rights. It has taken a long, long time, even for UN, to recognize the indigenous people's right. We are faced in today's world with the great challenge of climate change and the big disasters that we are already facing. And who are the greatest caretakers of Earth and planet are the indigenous peoples with their traditional and ancestral knowledge. Now, I wonder how much the modern education or the education of the future is taking into consideration the already existent knowledge, a wealth of knowledge. I have a long-standing life living with indigenous peoples all around the world, but somehow they are totally left over any system of education. Even their own languages are not taken into consideration, And if there are countries that we can praise because of their interest and their improvement into intercultural bilingual education, is basically for the same indigenous people, so that children in the urban areas do not know what's happening in their own things.
I'd like to thank, like others, it's Rashida Chaudhry from Bangladesh, the National Campaign Coalition. I'd like to actually request the panelists to think about not only the new landscape in education. We have talked about commercialization of education, education for all, equity, inclusiveness, everything. But the new economic landscape that is emerging, the whole power axis, power dynamics is changing from OECD to BRICS. And what would be our role in that kind of particular landscape? Increasing militarization. We talked about financing, but what about increasing militarization in our regions? Sure. So how do we achieve that kind of a balance of getting finances for those people we have been talking about for the last 2 days, the 60 million plus, and who are those? And thanks to Madam Aisha for bringing in the family and the traditional wisdom back into the picture, because we have not talked about the families, whose responsibility, because we have learned from our families all the values, yes, and then the institutions. Okay. How, if we really design our education future, then we have to think about the power dynamics and the financing and the new emerging actors. Thanks to Qatar Foundation for being the new emerging actor. Yes. And that's where I suppose our designing our education future. Inclusiveness, bringing in the voices of the voiceless, and how do we do it? Those are the challenges. That's
terrific. So very brief last thoughts from each of you. It's your last shot at this crowd. So go ahead, George, you start.
Very quickly, because time is running, of course, about the how do we say, perverse effect of media, TVs, etc. It's a real concern. I try to forbid my children to look at TV programs. I was unsuccessful, and I created an additional desire for them to go. Yeah. So I think what's important in the families, because you spoke of the family, is to create and to rethink, to refound the dialogue between parents and children. And not to force children to do something, but to accompany them the best way you can do it as a parent. And this is, for me, the most important aspect between the relationship between education and the environment, families, or also collectives. Some children, unfortunately, have no parents, they are orphans, and we have to address also this issue. Which is not families, but millions of children have no families to support them. So I think that education should become also a family for them, supportive family, to give them values and to give them confidence. I would like to finish with that. I think education is the fundamental vector of human adventure. Driving force for human adventure. And I am confident, because if education fails, humanity will fail. So we have no opportunity. We have to make education successful, whatever we think, whatever we have as an intention. And just to finish with that, I think we have to renew our perception of education. For me, to educate, to transmit knowledge, and knowledge is the only thing when you share, which expands. You know, you can share a cake, but you divide the cake. Yes. You can share time, but you lose some time to do it. You do it with pleasure. Knowledge is the only thing when you share, which will expand, which will improve through your students, through your children, etc. And I would like to go back to this, maybe too French and too poetic. Education is a challenge of love. We should understand education as a love concept.
We're keeping people from their lunch. They love that too. So Aisha, a brief thought, and we're finished.
So I will not repeat what you have said. For the TV, you know, to prevent my grandchild to watch TV, I will tell her the stories of my grandmother. So she keeps on watching me. As far as partnership is concerned, they will be bringing together, they bring the private sector. We build together mid-term strategy and long-term strategy. And education for all is for all by all. And the partner, development partners have their duty. They should not lend, but give, because it is education. I have talked a lot about indigenous people.
Yes.
I think I should not... as far as the BRICS are concerned, Africa would like to learn from their successful stories, successful experiences. So it's the South-South cooperation.
Okay, Aisha, we must finish.
Hey, you start learning from the womb of your mother. So families are really part of the educators.
Okay, thank you very much. And Peter, one sentence from you as well.
Okay, I try. I agree to the two speakers in their assumption of what we were discussing, and just want to add regarding one concrete question, to be concrete.
Yes.
On the dual system, it's about 60% of young people that go in there, and about 80% that go to the labor market later on, directly from the dual system to the labor market. And the industry is heavily involved, so they're absolutely convinced of it, and invest every year about 24 billion into that system.
Thank you, panel, very much. You guys were terrific. Thank you. And thanks, everyone, for coming.